Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. We are in the midst of a 90-day journey walking through the life of Jesus. And one of the readings this week comes from John chapter 10. And one of the things I've told y'all to be on the lookout, especially as you go through John's gospel, is all of these I am statements from Jesus. And when we get to John chapter 10, there's actually several of them all around the idea of sheep and where the sheep live and how the sheep function. Jesus tells us that he is the gate to the sheep pen, or the door, depending on the translation you're reading. He also says that he is the good shepherd. There's lots of illustrations he uses around this. But interestingly, in the midst of this teaching, John also tells us that the time of year that was being observed, and the more specifically the festival, the Jewish festival being observed while this conversation was going on, was the festival of dedication, which is the festival that we would refer to more commonly today as Hanukkah. So what we know is that Jesus, as a Jewish man, and again, as we walk through the life of Jesus, we need to remember where he came from. He was born into a Jewish family. He was Jewish by birth, and he was Jewish at his death, right? This was the culture. He spent his entire life immersed in that. And so there he was with his family and his followers and everyone that was gathered around at this point. And they're at the temple for Hanukkah. And this celebration, and some of you may, have learned different parts about it through the years, but essentially it was a celebration of the dedication of the second temple. Essentially, during the Maccabean revolt in the 2nd century BC, they came back in, all the Jews that had been displaced, they came back in, they took over Jerusalem again, and then they began to rebuild, including the temple. And when it came time to dedicate this second temple, it became known going forward as this festival of dedication. It was a festival of lights. They would light these things and they would remember. Now, the reason this is so interesting, and what I want to show you in that today, is that Jesus is talking very much in this context to a group of Jewish people who had diverse recollections and streams that they had come from in this tradition. Between the time that the Old Testament ends and where we pick up with the life of Jesus in the New Testament, centuries have passed, and the Jewish people have gone from a very streamlined culture to a more diverse culture. You had the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Essenes and the Zealots. You had these different versions of how they were living out their faith. And some of those were a more exclusionary, isolated kind of faith. They were in a world that didn't, for the most part, believe what they believed, and so they tucked away. And then others were a far more aggressive, we have to be about our faith out in the world. And so this is where I think it's interesting that Jesus comes into this place in the midst of this conversation and celebration, and he talks about being both the good shepherd who protects and watches over his sheep, but he also talks about being the gate, the door, the defender of his people. But ultimately, he says, it's going to be for everyone who recognizes my voice. Where before they had found shelter in the temple and in that identity, Jesus is now pushing into this space to say, I am who you're looking for. I can be both protector and defender, and I want you to know my voice. So, just a little more background into what was going on as Jesus was walking that day and talking and sharing those stories. I hope you're enjoying the reading. We're trying to get through John chapter 14 this week. And on Sunday, I'm going to be talking through stories from, again, several of the gospel accounts where Jesus calls his first disciples.